Hello. Tonight, we begin with the most fascinating fairy tale. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The Brownie of the Lake. Once upon a time, there lived in France a man whose name was Jalm Ryu. You might have walked a whole day without meeting anyone happier or more contented, for he had a large farm, plenty of money, and, above all, a daughter called Barbaik, the most graceful dancer and the best-dressed girl in the whole countryside. When she appeared on holidays in her embroidered cap, 5 petticoats, each one a little shorter than the other, and shoes with silver buckles, the women were all filled with envy, but little cared Barbaik what they might whisper behind her back, as long as she knew that her clothes were finer than anyone else's, and that she had more partners than any other girl. Now, amongst all the young men who wanted to marry Barbaik, the one whose heart was most set on her was her father's head man. But as his manners were rough, and he was exceedingly ugly, she would have nothing to say to him, and what was worse, often made fun of him with the rest. Jegu, for that was his name, of course heard of this, and it made him very unhappy. Still, he wouldn't leave the farm and look for work elsewhere, as he might have done, for then he would never see Barbaik at all. And what was life worth to him without that? One evening, he was bringing back his horses from the fields and stopped at a little lake on the way home to let them drink. He was tired with a long day's work and stood with his hand on the mane of one of the animals, waiting till they had done, and thinking all the while of Barbaik, when a voice came out of the gorse close by. "What is the matter, Jegu? You mustn't despair yet." The young man glanced up in surprise and asked who was there. "It is I, the Brownie of the Lake," replied the voice. "But where are you?" inquired Jegu. "Look close, and you will see me among the reeds in the form of a little green frog. I can take," he added proudly, "any shape I choose, and even, which is much harder, be invisible if I want to. Then show yourself to me in the shape in which your family generally appear," replied Jegu. "Certainly, if you wish." And the frog jumped on the back of one of the horses and changed into a little dwarf, all dressed green. This transformation rather frightened Jegu, But the brownie bade him have no fears, for he would not do him any harm. Indeed, he hoped that Yegu might find him of some use. "But why should you take all this interest in me?" asked the peasant suspiciously. "Because of a service you did me last winter, which I have never forgotten," answered the little fellow. "You know, I am sure that the Corrigans who dwell in the White Corn country have declared war on my people, because they say that they are the friends of man. We were therefore obliged to take refuge in distant lands and to hide ourselves at first under different animal shapes. Since that time, partly from habit and partly to amuse ourselves, we have continued to transform ourselves. And it was in this way that I got to know you." "How?" exclaimed Hegu, filled with astonishment. "Do you remember when you were digging in the field near the river 3 months ago? You found a robin redbreast caught in a net?" "Yes," answered Jegu. "I remember it very well. And I opened the net and let him go. Well, I was that robin redbreast, and ever since I have vowed to be your friend. And as you want to marry Barbaik, I will prove the truth of what I say by helping you to do so. Ah, my little brownie, if you can do that, there is nothing I won't give you, except my soul." "Then let me alone," rejoined the dwarf, "and I promise you that in a very few months you shall be master of the farm and of Barbaik." "But how are you going to do it?" exclaimed Hegu wonderingly. "That is my affair. Perhaps I may tell you later. Meanwhile, you just eat and sleep. And don't worry yourself about anything." Hegu declared that nothing could be easier. And then, taking off his hat, he thanked the dwarf heartily and led his horses back to the farm. Next morning was a holiday, and Barbaik was awake earlier than usual, as she wished to get through her work as soon as possible and be ready to start for a dance which was to be held some distance off. She went first to the cow house, which it was her duty to keep clean. But to her amazement, she found fresh straw put down, the racks filled with hay, the cows milked, and the pails standing neatly in a row. Of course, Hegu must have done this in the hope of my giving him a dance, she thought to herself. And when she met him outside the door, she stopped and thanked him for his help. To be sure, Hegu only replied roughly that he didn't know what she was talking about, but this answer made her feel all the more certain that it was he and nobody else. The same thing took place every day, and never had the cow house been so clean, nor the cows so fat. Morning and evening, Barbaik found her earthen pots full of milk and a pound of butter, freshly churned, ornamented with leaves. At the end of a few weeks, she grew so used to this state of affairs that she only got up just in time to prepare breakfast. Soon, even this grew to be unnecessary, for a day arrived when, coming downstairs, she discovered that the house was swept, the furniture polished, the fire lit, and the food ready, so that she had nothing to do except to ring the great bell which summoned the laborers from the fields to come and eat it. This, also, she thought, was the work of Hegu, and she could not help feeling that a husband of this sort would be very useful to a girl who liked to lie in bed and to amuse herself. Indeed, Barbaik had only to express a wish for it to be satisfied. If the wind was cold or the sun was hot, and she was afraid to go out, lest her complexion should be spoiled, she need only to run down to the spring close by and say softly, "I should like my churns to be full, and my wet linen to be stretched on the hedge to dry." And she need never give another thought to the matter. If she found the rye bread too hard to bake, or the oven taking too long to heat, she just murmured, "I should like to see my 6 loaves on the shelf above the bread box." And 2 hours after there they were. If she was too lazy to walk all the way to market along a dirty road, she would say out loud the night before, "Why am I not already back from Morlaix with my milk pot empty, my butter bowl inside it, a pound of wild cherries on my wooden plate, and the money I have gained in my apron pocket?" And in the morning, when she got up, lo and behold, there were standing at the foot of her bed the empty milk pot with the butter bowl inside, the black cherries on the wooden plate, and 6 new pieces of silver in the pocket of her apron. And she believed that all this was owing to Hegu, and she could no longer do without him, even in her thoughts. When things had reached this pass, the brownie told the young man that he had better ask Barbaik to marry him. And this time the girl did not turn rudely away, but listened patiently to the end. In her eyes, he was as ugly and awkward as ever, but he would certainly make a most useful husband, and she could sleep every morning till breakfast time, just like a young lady. And as for the rest of the day, it would not be half long enough for all she meant to do. She would wear the beautiful dresses that came when she wished for them, and visit her neighbors, who would be dying of envy all the while, and she would be able to dance as much as she wished. Jegu would always be there to work for her, and save for her, and watch over her. So, like a well-brought-up girl, Barbaik answered that it should be as her father pleased, knowing quite well that old Rio had often said that after he was dead, there was no one so capable of carrying on the farm. The marriage took place the following month, and a few days later, the old man died quite suddenly. Now Hegu had everything to see to himself, and somehow it did not seem so easy as when the farmer was alive. But once more the brownie stepped in, and was better than 10 laborers. It was he who plowed and sowed and reaped, and if, as happened occasionally, it was needful to get the work done quickly, the brownie called in some of his friends, and as soon as it was light, a host of little dwarfs might have been seen in the fields, busy with hoe, fork, or sickle. But by the time the people were about, all was finished, and the little fellows had disappeared, and all the payment the brownie ever asked for was a bowl of broth. From the very day of her marriage, Barbaik had noted with surprise and rage that things ceased to be done for her as they had been done all the weeks and months before. She complained to Hegu of his laziness, and he only stared at her, not understanding what she was talking about. But the brownie, who was standing by, burst out laughing, and confessed that all the good offices she spoke of had been performed by him for the sake of Hegu, but that now he had other business to do, and it was high time that she looked after her house herself. Barbaik was furious. Each morning, when she was obliged to get up before dawn to milk the cows and go to market, and each evening when she had to sit up till midnight in order to churn the butter, her heart was filled with rage against the brownie who had caused her to expect a life of ease and pleasure. But when she looked at Hegu and beheld his red face, squinting eyes, and untidy hair, her anger was doubled. "If it had not been for you, you miserable dwarf," she would say between her teeth, "if it had not been for you, I should never have married that man, and I should still have been going to dances, where the young men would have brought me presents of nuts and cherries, and told me that I was the prettiest girl in the parish, while now I can receive no presents except from my husband. I can never dance except with my husband. Oh, you wretched dwarf, I will never, never forgive you." In spite of her fierce words, no one knew better than Barbaik how to put her pride in her pocket when it suited her. And after receiving an invitation to a wedding, she begged the brownie to get her a horse to ride there. To her great joy, he consented, bidding her set out for the city of the dwarfs and to tell them exactly what she wanted. Full of excitement, Barbaik started on her journey. It wasn't long, and when she reached the town, she went straight to the dwarfs, who were holding council in a wide green place, and said to them, "Listen, my friends, I have come to beg you to lend me a black horse with eyes, a mouth, ears, bridles, and saddle." She had hardly spoken when the horse appeared, and mounting on his back, she started for the village where the wedding was to be held. At first, she was so delighted with the chance of a holiday from the work which she hated that she noticed nothing. But very soon it struck her as odd that as she passed along the roads full of people, they all laughed as they looked at her horse. At length, she caught some words uttered by one man to another. "Why, the farmer's wife has sold her horse's tail," and turned in her saddle. Yes, it was true. Her horse had no tail. She had forgotten to ask for one, and the wicked dwarfs had carried out her orders to the letter. "Well, at any rate, I shall soon be there," she thought, and shaking the reins, tried to urge the horse to a gallop. But it was of no use. He declined to move out of a walk, and she was forced to hear all the jokes that were made upon her. In the evening, she returned to the farm more angry than ever, and quite determined to revenge herself on the brownie whenever she had the chance, which happened to be very soon. It was the spring, and just the time of year when the dwarfs held their fete. So one day, the brownie asked Hegu if he might bring his friends to have supper in the great barn, and whether he would allow them to dance there. Of course, Hegu was only too pleased to be able to do anything for the brownie, and he ordered Barbaik to spread her best tablecloths in the barn, and to make a quantity of little loaves and pancakes, and besides, to keep all the milk given by the cows that morning. He expected she would refuse, as he knew she hated the dwarfs, but she said nothing, and prepared the supper as he had bidden her. When all was ready, the dwarfs, in new green suits, came bustling in, very happy and merry, and took their seats at the table. But in a moment, they all sprang up with a cry and ran away screaming, for Barbaik had placed pans of hot coals under their feet, and all their poor little toes were burnt. "You won't forget that in a hurry," she said, smiling grimly to herself. But in a moment, they were back again with large pots of water, which they poured on the fire. Then they joined hands and danced round it, singing, "Wicked traitress, Barbe Riu, our poor toes are burned by you. Now we hurry from your hall. Bad luck light upon you all." That evening, they left the country forever, and Yegu, without their help, grew poorer and poorer, and at last died of misery, while Barbaik was glad to find work in the market of Morlaix. The Winning of Olwen. There was once a king and queen who had a little boy, and they called his name Kilch. The queen, his mother, fell ill soon after his birth, and as she could not take care of him herself, she sent him to a woman she knew up in the mountains, so that he might learn to go out in all weathers, and bear heat and cold, and grow tall and strong. Kilwich was quite happy with his nurse, and ran races, and climbed hills with the children who were his playfellows. And in the winter, when the snow lay on the ground, sometimes a man with a harp would stop and beg for shelter, and in return would sing them songs of strange things that had happened in the years gone by. But long before this, changes had taken place in the court of Kilhuch's father. Soon after she had sent her baby away, the queen became much worse, and at length, seeing that she was going to die, she called her husband to her and said, "Never again shall I rise from this bed, and by thou wilt take another wife. But lest she should make thee forget thy son, I charge thee that thou take not a wife until thou see a briar with 2 blossoms upon my grave." And this he promised her. Then she further bade him to see to her grave that nothing might grow thereon. This likewise he promised her. And soon she died. And for 7 years the king sent a man every morning to see that nothing was growing on the queen's grave. But at the end of 7 years, he forgot. One day, when the king was out hunting, he rode past the place where the queen lay buried, and there he saw a briar growing with 2 blossoms on it. "It is time that I took a wife," said he, and after long looking, he found one, but he did not tell her about his son. Indeed, he hardly remembered that he had one, till she heard it at last from an old woman whom she had gone to visit. And the new queen was very pleased, and sent messengers to fetch the boy. And in his father's court he stayed, while the years went by, till one day the queen told him that a prophecy had foretold that he was to win for his wife Olwen, the daughter of Ysbaddaden Pencaur. When he heard this, Kilch felt proud and happy. Surely he must be a man now, he thought, or there would be no talk of a wife for him. And his mind dwelt all day upon his promised bride, and what she would be so like when he beheld her. "What aileth thee, my son?" asked his father at last, when Kilch had forgotten something he had been bidden to do. And Kilwich blushed red as he answered, "My stepmother says that none but Olwen, the daughter of Ysbaddaden Pencaur, shall be my wife." "That will be easily fulfilled," replied his father. "Arthur the king is thy cousin. Go therefore unto him, and beg him to cut thy hair, and to grant thee this boon." Then the youth pricked forth upon a dapple grey horse of 4 years old, with a bridle of linked gold, and gold upon his saddle. In his hand he bore 2 spears of silver with heads of steel. A war horn of ivory was slung round his shoulder, and by his side hung a golden sword. Before him were 2 brindled, white-breasted greyhounds, with collars of rubies round their necks, and the one that was on the left side bounded across to the right side, and the one on the right to the left, and like 2 sea swallows sported round him, and his horse cast up 4 sods with his 4 hoofs, like 4 swallows in the air about his head, now above, now below, About him was a robe of purple, and an apple of gold was at each corner. And every one of the apples was of the value of 100 cows. And the blades of grass bent not beneath him, so light were his horse's feet, as he journeyed toward the gate of Arthur's palace. "Is there a porter?" cried Kilch, looking round for someone to open the gate. "There is, and I am Arthur's porter every first day of January," answered a man coming out to him. "The rest of the year there are other porters, and among them Penpingion, who goes upon his head to save his feet." "Well, open the portal, I say." "No, that I may not do, for none can enter save the son of a king or a peddler who has goods to sell. But elsewhere there will be food for thy dogs, and hay for thy horse, and for thee collops cooked and peppered, and sweet wine shall be served in the guest chamber." "That will not do for me," answered Kilch. "If thou wilt not open the gate, I will send up 3 shouts that shall be heard from Cornwall unto the north, and yet again to Ireland. Whatsoever clamour thou mayest make," spake Glewlwyd the porter, "thou shalt not enter until I first go and speak with Arthur." Then Glewlwyd went into the hall, and Arthur said to him, "Hast thou news from the gate?" And the porter answered, "Far have I travelled, both in this island and elsewhere, and many kingly men have I seen, but never yet have I beheld one equal in majesty to him who now stands at the door. If walking thou didst enter here, return thou running," replied Arthur, "and let every one that opens and shuts the eye show him respect and serve him. For it is not meet to keep such a man in the wind and rain." So Glewlwyd unbarred the gate, and Kilwich rode in upon his charger. "Greeting unto thee, O ruler of this land," cried he, "and greeting no less to the lowest than to the highest." "Greeting to thee also," answered Arthur. "Sit thou between 2 of my warriors, and thou shalt have minstrels before thee, and all that belongs to one born to be a king, while thou remainest in my palace." "I am not come," replied Kilch, "for meat and drink, but to obtain a boon. And if thou grant it me, I will pay it back, and will carry thy praise to the 4 winds of heaven. But if thou wilt not grant it to me, then I will proclaim thy discourtesy wherever thy name is known." "What thou askest, that shalt thou receive," said Arthur. "As far as the wind dries, and the rain moistens, and the sun revolves, and the sea encircles, and the earth extends, save only my ship, and my mantle, my sword, and my lance, my shield, and my dagger, and Guinevere my wife. I would that thou bless my hair, spake Kilwch. And Arthur answered, That shall be granted thee. Forthwith he bade his men fetch him a comb of gold and a scissors with loops of silver. And he combed the hair of Kilwch his guest. Tell me who thou art, he said, for my heart warms to thee, and I feel thou art come of my blood. I am Kilwch, son of Kilydd, replied the youth. Then my cousin thou art in truth, replied Arthur. And whatsoever boon thou mayest ask, thou shalt receive. The boon I crave is that thou mayest win for me Olwen, the daughter of Yspaddaden Pencoer. And this boon I seek likewise at the hands of thy warriors. From Saul, who can stand all day upon one foot. From Osol, who, if he were to find himself on the top of the highest mountain in the world, could make it into a level plain in the beat of a bird's wing. From Clust, who, though he were buried under the earth, could yet hear the ant leave her nest 50 miles away. From these, and from Kai, and from Bedwyr, and from all thy mighty men, I crave this boon. O Kilwch, said Arthur, never have I heard of the maiden of whom thou speakest, nor of her kindred, but I will send messengers to seek her, if thou wilt give me time. Mo, from this night to the end of the year, right willingly will I grant thee, replied Kilwch. But when the end of the year came and the messengers returned, Kilwch was wroth, and spoke rough words to Arthur. It was Kai, the boldest of the warriors, and the swiftest of foot, he who could pass 9 nights without sleep, and 9 days beneath the water, that answered him, Rash youth that thou art, darest thou speak thus to Arthur? Come with us, and we will not part company till we have won that maiden, or till thou confess that there is none such in the world. Then Arthur summoned his 5 best men, and bade them go with Kilwch. There was Bedwyr, the one-handed, Kai's comrade and brother in arms, the swiftest man in Britain save Arthur. There was Kindeleg, who knew the paths in a land where he had never been as surely as he did those of his own country. There was Gwriwr, that could speak all tongues, and Gwalchmai, the son of Gwyar, who never returned till he had gained what he sought. And last of all, there was Menno, who could weave a spell over them, so that none might see them, while they could see everyone. So these 7 journeyed together till they reached. Soon they heard steps approaching, and Kai and the rest entered into the house and ate and drank. After that, the woman opened a chest, and out of it came a youth with curling yellow hair. It is a pity to hide him thus, said Gwriwr, for well I know that he has done no evil. 23 of my sons has Yspaddaden slain, and I have no more hope of saving this one," replied she. And Kai was full of sorrow and answered, "Let him come with me and be my comrade, and he shall never be slain unless I am slain also." And so it was agreed. "What is your errand here?" asked the woman. "We seek Olwen the maiden for this youth," answered Kai. "Does she ever come hither so that she may be seen?" "She comes every Saturday to wash her hair, and in the vessel where she washes, she leaves all her rings, and never does she so much as send a messenger to fetch them." "Will she come if she is bidden?" asked Kai, pondering. "She will come, but unless you pledge me your faith that you will not harm her, I will not fetch her." "We pledge it," said they, and the maiden came. A fair sight was she in a robe of flame-colored silk, with a collar of ruddy gold about her neck, bright with emeralds and rubies. More yellow was her head than the flower of the broom, and her skin was whiter than the foam of the wave, and fairer were her hands than the blossom of the wood anemone. 4 white trefoils sprang up where she trod, and therefore was she called Olwen. She entered and sat down on a bench beside Kilwich, and he spake to her. "Ah, maiden, since first I heard thy name, I have loved thee. Wilt thou not come away with me from this evil place?" "That I cannot do," answered she, "for I have given my word to my father not to go without his knowledge, for his life will only last till I am betrothed. Whatever is, must be. But this counsel I will give you. Go, and ask me of my father, and whatsoever he shall require of thee, grant it, and thou shalt win me. But if thou deny him anything, thou wilt not obtain me, and it will be well for thee if thou escape with thy life." "All this I promise," said he. So she returned to the castle, and all Arthur's men went after her, and entered the hall. "Greeting to thee, Yspaddaden Penkor," said they. "We come to ask thy daughter Olwen for Kilwch, son of Kilid. Come hither tomorrow, and I will answer you," replied Yspaddaden Penkor. And as they rose to leave the hall, he caught up one of the 3 poisoned darts that lay beside him, and flung it in their midst. But Bedwyr saw and caught it, and flung it back so hard that it pierced the knee of Yspaddaden. "A gentle son-in-law, truly," he cried, writhing with pain. "I shall ever walk the worse for this rudeness. Cursed be the smith who forged it, and the anvil on which it was wrought." That night the men slept in the house of Custennin the herdsman, and the next day they proceeded to the castle, and entered the hall, and said, Yspaddaden Penkor, give us thy daughter, and thou shalt keep her dower. And unless thou wilt do this, we will slay thee. Her 4 great-grandmothers and her 4 great-grandfathers yet live, answered Yspaddaden Penkor. It is needful that I take counsel with them. Be it so. We will go to meat. But as they turned, he took up the 2nd dart that lay by his side and cast it after them. And Menjo caught it and flung it at him and wounded him in the chest so that it came out at his back. A gentle son-in-law, truly, cried Yspaddaden. The iron pains me like the bite of a horse leech. Cursed be the hearth whereon it was heated, and the smith who formed it. The 3rd day, Arthur's men returned to the palace into the presence of Yspaddaden. Shoot not at me again, said he, unless you desire death, but lift up my eyebrows, which have fallen over my eyes, that I may see my son-in-law. Then they arose, and as they did so, Yspaddaden Penkor took the 3rd poisoned dart, and cast it at them, and Kilch caught it, and flung it back, and it passed through his eyeball, and came out on the other side of his head. A gentle son-in-law, truly. Cursed be the fire in which it was forged, and the man who fashioned it. The next day, Arthur's men came again to the palace, and said, Shoot not at us any more, unless thou desirest more pain than even now thou hast. But give us thy daughter, without more words. Where is he that seeks my daughter? Let him come hither, so that I may see him. And Kilch sat himself in a chair, and spoke face to face with him. Is it thou that seekest my daughter? It is I, answered Kilch. First give me thy word, that thou wilt do nothing towards me that is not just. And when thou hast won for me that which I shall ask, then thou shalt wed my daughter. I promise right willingly, said Kilch. Name what thou wilt. Seest thou yonder hill? Well, in one day it shall be rooted up, and plowed and sown, and the grain shall ripen. And of that wheat I will bake the cakes for my daughter's wedding. It will be easy for me to compass this, although thou mayest deem it will not be easy, answered Kilvuch, thinking of Osol, under whose feet the highest mountain became straightway a plain. But Yspaddaden paid no heed, and continued, Seest thou that field yonder? When my daughter was born, 9 bushels of flax were sown therein, and not one blade has sprung up. I require thee to sow fresh flax in the ground, that my daughter may wear a veil spun from it on the day of her wedding. It will be easy for me to compass this. Though thou compass this, there is that which thou wilt not compass. For thou must bring me the basket of Gwydnu Garanhir, which will give meat to the whole world. it is for thy wedding feast. Thou must also fetch me the drinking horn that is never empty, and the harp that never ceases to play until it is bidden. Also the comb and scissors and razor that lie between the 2 ears of Trith the boar, so that I may arrange my hair for the wedding. And though thou get this, yet there is that which thou wilt not get. For Trith the boar will not let any man take from him the comb and the scissors, unless Drudwyn the whelp hunt him. But no leash in the world can hold Drudwyn save the leash of Cant Ewan, and no collar will hold the leash except the collar of Canhastier. It will be easy for me to compass this, though thou mayest think it will not be easy. Kilwich answered him, Though thou get all these things, yet there is that which thou wilt not get. Throughout the world there is none that can hunt with this dog, save Mabon, the son of Modron. He was taken from his mother when 3 nights old, and it is not known where he now is, nor whether he is living or dead. And though thou find him, yet the boar will never be slain, save only with the sword of Gwernach the giant. And if thou obtain it not, neither shalt thou obtain my daughter. Horses shall I have, and knights from my lord Arthur, and I shall gain thy daughter, and thou shalt lose thy life. The speech of Kilch, the son of Kilid, with Isbadaden Pencower, was ended. Then Arthur's men set forth, and Kilch with them, and journeyed till they reached the largest castle in the world, and a black man came out to meet them. Whence comest thou, O man? Asked they. And whose is that castle? That is the castle of Gwernach the giant, as all the world knows, answered the man. But no guest ever returned thence alive, and none may enter the gate except a craftsman who brings his trade. But little did Arthur's men heed his warning, and they went straight to the gate. Open, cried Gwrhyr. I will not open, replied the porter. And wherefore? Asked Kai. The knife is in the meat, and the drink is in the horn, and there is revelry in the hall of Gwernach the giant. And save for a craftsman who brings his trade, the gate will not be opened tonight. Verily then, I may enter, said Kai, for there is no better burnisher of swords than I. This will I tell Gwernach the giant, and I will bring thee his answer. Bid the man come before me, cried Gwernach, when the porter had told his tale, for my sword stands much in need of polishing. So Kai passed in and saluted Gwernach the giant. Is it true, what I hear of thee, that thou canst burnish swords? It is true, answered Kai. Then was the sword of Gwernach brought to him. Shall it be burnished white or blue? Said Kai, taking a whetstone from under his arm. As thou wilt, answered the giant, and speedily did Kai polish half the sword. The giant marveled at his skill and said, "It is a wonder that such a man as thou shouldst be without a companion." "I have a companion, noble sir, but he has no skill in this art." "What is his name?" asked the giant. "Let the porter go forth, and I will tell him how he may know him. The head of his lance will leave its shaft and draw blood from the wind, and descend upon its shaft again." So the porter opened the gate, and Bedwyr entered. Now there was much talk amongst those who remained without when the gate closed upon Bedwyr, and Goreu, son of Custennin, prevailed with the porter, and he and his companions got in also and hid themselves. By this time the whole of the sword was polished, and Kai gave it into the hand of Ranach the giant, who felt it and said, "Thy work is good. I am content." Then said Kai, "It is thy scabbard that hath rusted thy sword. Give it to me, that I may take out the wooden sides of it, and put in new ones." And he took the scabbard in one hand, and the sword in the other, and came and stood behind the giant, as if he would have sheathed the sword in the scabbard. But with it he struck a blow at the head of the giant, and it rolled from his body. After that, they despoiled the castle of its gold and jewels, and returned, bearing the sword of the giant, to Arthur's court. They told Arthur how they had sped, and they all took counsel together, and agreed that they must set out on the quest for Mabon, the son of Modron. And Gwrhyr, who knew the languages of beasts and of birds, went with them. So they journeyed until they came to the nest of an ousel, and Gwrhyr spoke to her. "Tell me if thou knowest aught of Mabon the son of Modron, who was taken when 3 nights old from between his mother and the wall." And the ousel answered, "When I first came here, I was a young bird, and there was a smith's anvil in this place, but from that time no work has been done upon it, save that every evening I have pecked at it. Till now there is not so much as the size of a nut remaining thereof. Yet all that time I have never once heard of the man you name. Still, there is a race of beasts older than I, and I will guide you to them." So the ousel flew before them, till she reached the stag of Redinvre. But when they inquired of the stag whether he knew aught of Mabon, he shook his head. "When first I came hither," said he, "the plain was bare, save for one oak sapling, which grew up to be an oak with 100 branches. All that is left of that oak is a withered stump. But never once have I heard of the man you name. Nevertheless, as you are Arthur's men, I will guide you to the place where there is an animal older than I." And the stag ran before them till he reached the owl of Quam Colwyd. But when they inquired of the owl if he knew aught of Mabon, he shook his head "When first I came hither," said he, "the valley was a wooded glen. Then a race of men came and rooted it up. After that there grew a second wood, and then a third, which you see. Look at my wings also. Are they? When I first came hither," said the eagle, "there was a rock here, and every evening I pecked at the stars from the top of it. Now behold, it is not even a span high. But only once have I heard of the man you name, and that was when I went in search of food as far as Lin Lao. I swooped down upon a salmon and struck my claws into him. But he drew me down under water till scarcely could I escape from him. Then I summoned all my kindred to destroy him. But he made peace with me, and I took 50 fish spears from his back. Unless he may know something of the man whom you seek, I cannot tell who may. But I will guide you to the place where he is." So they followed the eagle, who flew before them, though so high was he in the sky. It was often hard to mark his flight. At length, he stopped above a deep pool in a river. "Salmon of Lin Liu," he called, "I have come to thee with an embassy from Arthur, to inquire if thou knowest aught concerning Mabon, the son of Modron." And the salmon answered, "As much as I know, I will tell thee. With every tide I go up the river, till I reach the walls of Gloucester. And there have I found such wrong as I never found elsewhere. And that you may see that what I say is true, let 2 of you go thither on my shoulders." So Kai and Gwrhyr went upon the shoulders of the salmon, and were carried under the walls of the prison, from which proceeded the sound of great weeping. Who is it that thus laments in this house of stone? It is I, Mabon the son of Modron. Will silver or gold bring thy freedom, or only battle and fighting? Asked Gwrhyr again. By fighting alone shall I be set free, said Mabon. Then they sent a messenger to Arthur to tell him that Mabon was found. And he brought all his warriors to the castle of Gloucester and fell fiercely upon it, while Kai and Bedwyr went on the shoulders of the salmon to the gate of the dungeon, and broke it down and carried away Mabon. And he, now being free, returned home with Arthur. After this, on a certain day, as Gwrhyr was walking across a mountain, he heard a grievous cry, and he hastened towards it. In a little valley, he saw the heather burning and the fire spreading fast towards an anthill, and all the ants were hurrying to and fro, not knowing whither to go. Gwrhyr had pity on them and put out the fire, and in gratitude the ants brought him the 9 bushels of flax seed, which Ysbaddaden Pencor required of Kilwch. And many of the other marvels were done likewise by Arthur and his knights. And at last it came to the fight with Trith the boar, to obtain the comb and the scissors and the razor that lay between his ears. But hard was the boar to catch, and fiercely did he fight when Arthur's men gave him battle, so that many of them were slain. Up and down the country went Trith the boar, and Arthur followed after him, till they came to the Severn Sea. There 3 knights caught his feet unawares and plunged him into the water, while one snatched the razor from him, and another seized the scissors. But before they laid hold of the comb, he had shaken them all off, and neither man nor horse nor dog could reach him till he came to Cornwall, whither Arthur had sworn he should not go. Thither Arthur followed after him with his knights, and if it had been hard to win the razor and the scissors, the struggle for the comb was fiercer still. Often it seemed as if the boar would be the victor, but at length Arthur prevailed, and the boar was driven into the sea. And whether he was drowned or where he went, no man knows to this day. In the end, all the marvels were done, and Kilwich set forward, and with him Goru, the son of Custennin, to Ysbaddaden Pencawer, bearing in their hands the razor, the scissors, and the comb. And Ysbaddaden Pencawer was shaved by Coll. "Is thy daughter mine now?" asked Kilwich. "She is thine," answered Ysbaddaden, "but it is Arthur, and none other, who has won her for thee. Of my own free will, thou shouldst never have had her, for now I must lose my life." And as he spake, Goru the son of Custennin cut off his head, as it had been ordained. And Arthur's hosts returned each man to his own country. Not withered stumps? Yet until today I have never heard of the man you name. Still, I will guide you to the oldest animal in the world, and the one that has traveled most, the eagle of Gwern Abbey. And he flew before them, as fast as his old wings would carry him, till he reached the eagle of Gwern Abbey. But when they inquired of the eagle whether he knew aught of Mabon, he shook his head. A vast open plain, in which was a fair castle. But though it seemed so close, it was not until the evening of the 3rd day that they really drew near to it. And in front of it, a flock of sheep was spread, so many in number that there seemed no end to them. A shepherd stood on a mound watching over them, and by his side was a dog, as large as a horse 9 winters old. "Whose is this castle, O herdsman?" asked the knights. "Stupid are ye truly," answered the herdsman. "All the world knows that this is the castle of Ysbaddaden Pencawer. And who art thou?" "I am called Custennin, brother of Ysbaddaden, and ill has he treated me. And who are you? And what do you here? We come from Arthur the king, to seek Olwen, the daughter of Ysbaddaden. But at this news, the shepherd gave a cry. O men, be warned, and turn back while there is yet time. Others have gone on that quest, but none have escaped to tell the tale. And he rose to his feet, as if to leave them. Then Kilch held out to him a ring of gold, and he tried to put it on his finger, but it was too small. So he placed it in his glove, and went home, and gave it to his wife. Whence came this ring? Asked she, for such good luck is not wont to befall thee. The man to whom this ring belonged, thou shalt see here in the evening, answered the shepherd. He is Kilch, son of Kilid, cousin to King Arthur, and he has come to seek Olwen. And when the wife heard that, she knew that Kilwich was her nephew, and her heart yearned after him, half with joy at the thought of seeing him, and half with sorrow for the doom she feared. Little Lasse. There was once a little boy whose name was Lars, and because he was so little, he was called Little Lasse. He was a brave little man, for he sailed round the world in a pea-shell boat. It was summertime, when the pea shells grew long and green in the garden. Little Lasse crept into the pea bed where the pea stalks rose high above his cap, and he picked 17 large shells, the longest and straightest he could find. Little Lasse thought, perhaps, that no one saw him, but that was foolish, for God sees everywhere. Then the gardener came with his gun over his shoulder, and he heard something rustling in the pea bed. I think that must be a sparrow, he said. Ras, ras. But no sparrows flew out, for little Lasse had no wings, only 2 small legs. Wait, I will load my gun and shoot the sparrows, said the gardener. Then little Lasse was frightened and crept out onto the path. Forgive me, dear gardener, he said. I wanted to get some fine boats. Well, I will this time, said the gardener. But another time little Lasse must ask leave to go and look for boats in the pea bed. I will, answered Lasse, and he went off to the shore. Then he opened the shells with a pin, split them carefully in 2, and broke small little bits of sticks for the rowers' seats. Then he took the peas which were in the shells and put them in the boats for cargo. Some of the shells got broken, some remained whole, and when all were ready, Lasse had 12 boats. But they should not be boats. They should be large warships. He had 3 liners, 3 frigates, 3 brigs, and 3 schooners. The largest liner was called Hercules, and the smallest schooner, the Flea. Little Lasse put all the 12 into the water, and they floated as splendidly and as proudly as any great ship over the waves of the ocean. And now the ships must sail round the world. The great island over there was Asia, that large stone Africa, the little island America. The small stones were Polynesia, and the shore from which the ships sailed out was Europe. The whole fleet set off and sailed far away to other parts of the world. The ships of the line steered a straight course to Asia. The frigates sailed to Africa, the brigs to America, and the schooners to Polynesia. But little Lasse remained in Europe and threw small stones out into the great sea. Now there was on the shore of Europe a real boat, Father's own, a beautiful white-painted boat, and little Lasse got into it. Father and Mother had forbidden this, but little Lasse forgot. He thought he should very much like to travel to some other part of the world. I shall row out a little way, only a very little way, he thought. The pea-shell boats had traveled so far that they only looked like little specks on the ocean. I shall seize Hercules on the coast of Asia, said Lasse, and then row home again to Europe. He shook the rope that held the boat, and strange to say, the rope became loose. Ditch, ratch, a man is a man, and so little Lasse manned the boat. Now he would row, and he could row, for he had rowed so often on the steps at home, when the steps pretended to be a boat, and Father's big stick an oar. But when little Lasse wanted to row, there were no oars to be found in the boat. The oars were locked up in the boathouse, and little Lasse had not noticed that the boat was empty. It is not so easy as one thinks to row to Asia without oars. What could little Lasse do now? The boat was already some distance out on the sea, and the wind, which blew from land, was driving it still further out. Lasse was frightened and began to cry, but there was no one on the shore to hear him, only a big crow perched alone in the birch tree, and the gardener's black cat sat under the birch tree, waiting to catch the crow. Neither of them troubled themselves in the least about little Lasse, who was drifting out to sea. Ah, how sorry little Lasse was now that he had been disobedient and got into the boat, when Father and Mother had so often forbidden him to do so. Now it was too late. He could not get back to land. Perhaps he would be lost out on the great sea. What should he do? When he had shouted until he was tired, and no one heard him, he put his two little hands together and said, "Good God, do not be angry with little Lasse." And then he went to sleep. For although it was daylight, old Nukumati was sitting on the shores of the land of Nod, and was fishing for little children with his long fishing rod. He heard the low words which little Lasse said to God, and he immediately drew the boat to himself and laid little Lasse to sleep on a bed of rose leaves. Then Nukumati said to one of the dreams, "Play with little Lasse so that he does not feel lonesome." It was a little dream boy, so little that he was less than Lasse himself. He had blue eyes and fair hair, a red cap with a silver band, and white coat with pearls on the collar. He came to little Lasse and said, "Would you like to sail round the world?" "Yes," said Lasse in his sleep. "I should like to." "Come then," said the dream boy, "and let us sail in your pea-shell boats. You shall sail in Hercules, and I shall sail in the Flea." So they sailed away from the land of Nod, and in a little while Hercules and the Flea were on the shores of Asia, away at the other end of the world, where the ice sea flows through Bering Straits into the Pacific Ocean. A long way off in the winter mist, they could see the explorer Nordenskjöld with his ship Vega trying to find an opening between the ice. It was so cold. The great icebergs glittered strangely, and the huge whales now lived under the ice, for they could not make a hole through with their awkward heads. All around on the dreary shore there was snow and snow as far as the eye could see. Little gray men in shaggy skins moved about and drove in small sledges through the snowdrifts, but the sledges were drawn by dogs. "Shall we land here?" asked the dream boy. "No," said little Lasse. "I am so afraid that the whales would swallow us up, and the big dogs bite us. Let us sail instead to another part of the world." "Very well," said the dream boy with the red cap and the silver band. "It is not far to America." And at the same moment they were there. The sun was shining, and it was very warm. Tall palm trees grew in long rows on the shore and bore coconuts in their top branches. Men, red as copper, galloped over the immense green prairies and threw their arrows at the buffaloes, who turned against them with their sharp horns. An enormous cobra, which had crept up the stem of a tall palm tree, threw itself onto a little llama that was grazing at the foot. Naps! It was all over with the little llama. "Shall we land here?" asked the dream boy. "No," said little Lasse. "I am so afraid that the buffaloes will butt us and the great serpent eat us up. Let us travel to another part of the world." "Very well," said the dream boy with the white coat. "It is only a little way to Polynesia." And then they were there. It was very warm there, as warm as in a hot bath in Finland. Costly spices grew on the shores: the pepper plant, the cinnamon tree, ginger, saffron, the coffee plant and the tea plant, brown people with long ears, and thick lips and hideously painted faces hunted a yellow-spotted tiger among the high bamboos on the shore. And the tiger turned on them and stuck its claws into one of the brown men. Then all the others took to flight. "Shall we land here?" asked the dream boy. "No," said little Lasse. "Don't you see the tiger away there by the pepper plant? Let us travel to another part of the world." "We can do so," said the dream boy with the blue eyes. "We are not far from Africa." And as he said that, they were there. They anchored at the mouth of a great river, where the shores were as green as the greenest velvet. A little distance from the river, an immense desert stretched away. The air was yellow. The sun shone so hot, as if it would burn the earth to ashes. And the people were as black as the blackest jet. They rode across the desert on tall camels. The lions roared with thirst, and the great crocodiles, with their gray lizard heads and sharp white teeth, gaped up out of the river. "Shall we land here?" asked the dream boy. "No," said little Lasse. "The sun would burn us, and the lions and the crocodiles would eat us up. Let us travel to another part of the world." "We can travel back to Europe," said the dream boy with the fair hair. And with that, they were there. They came to a shore where it was all so cool and familiar and friendly. There stood the tall birch tree with its drooping leaves. At the top sat the old crow, and at its foot crept the gardener's black cat. Not far away was a house which little Lasse had seen before. Near the house there was a garden, and in the garden a pea bed with long pea shells. An old gardener with a green coat walked about and wondered if the cucumbers were ripe. Phylax was barking on the steps, and when he saw little Lasse, he wagged his tail. Old Stina was milking the cows in the farmyard, and there was a very familiar lady in a check woolen shawl on her way to the bleaching green to see if the clothes were bleached. There was, too, a well-known gentleman in a yellow summer coat with a long pipe in his mouth. He was going to see if the reapers had cut the rye. A boy and a girl were running on the shore and calling out, "Little Lasse, come home for bread and butter." "Shall we land here?" asked the dream boy, and he blinked his blue eyes roguishly. "Come with me, and I shall ask Mother to give you some bread and butter and a glass of milk," said little Lasse. "Wait a little," said the dream boy. And now little Lasse saw that the kitchen door was open, and from within there was heard a low, pleasant frizzling, like that which is heard when one whisks yellow batter with a wooden ladle into a hot frying pan. "Perhaps we should sail back to Polynesia now?" said the dream boy. "No, they are frying pancakes in Europe just now," said little Lasse, and he wanted to jump ashore, but he could not. the dream boy had tied him with a chain of flowers so that he could not move. And now all the little dreams came about him. Thousands and thousands of little children, and they made a ring around him and sang a little song. The world is very, very wide, little Lasse, Lasse. And though you've sailed beyond the tide, you can never tell how wide it is on the other side. Lasse, little Lasse, you have found it cold and hot, little Lasse, Lasse. But in no land is God not, Lasse, little Lasse. Many men live there as here, but they all to God are dear, little Lasse, Lasse. When his angel is your guide, little Lasse, Lasse, then no har can e'er betide, even on the other side, where the wild beasts wander. But tell us now, whene'er you roam, do you not find the best is home of all the lands you've looked upon, Lasse, little Lasse? When the dreams had sung their song, they skipped away, and Nukumati carried Lasse back to the boat. He lay there for a long time, quite still, and he still heard the frying pan frizzling at home on the fire. The frizzling was very plain. Little Lasse heard it quite near him. And so he woke up and rubbed his eyes. There he lay in the boat, where he had fallen asleep. The wind had turned, and the boat had drifted out with one wind and drifted in with another, while little Lasse slept. And what Lasse thought was frizzling in a frying pan was the low murmur of the waves as they washed against the stones on the shore. But he was not altogether wrong, for the clear blue sea is like a great pan in which God's Son makes cakes for good children. Little Lasse rubbed the sleep out of his eyes and looked around him. Everything was the same as before. The crow in the birch tree, the cat on the grass, and the pea-shell fleet on the shore. Some of the ships had foundered, and some had drifted back to land. Hercules had come back with its cargo from Asia. The flea had arrived from Polynesia, and the other parts of the world were just where they were before. Little Lasse did not know what to think. He had so often been in that grotto in the land of Nod, and did not know what tricks dreams can play. But little Lasse did not trouble his head with such things. He gathered together his boats and walked up the shore back to the house. His brother and sister ran to meet him and called out from the distance, "Where have you been so long, Lasse? Come home and get some bread and butter." The kitchen door stood open, and inside was heard a strange frizzling. The gardener was near the gate, watering the dill and parsley, the carrots and parsnips. "Well," he said, "where has little Lasse been so long?" Little Lasse straightened himself up stiff and answered, "I have sailed round the world in a pea-shell boat." "Oh?" said the gardener. He had forgotten Dreamland, but you have not forgotten it. You know that it exists. You know the beautiful grotto and the bright silver walls whose luster never fades, the sparkling diamonds which never grow dim, the music which never ceases its low, soft murmur through the sweet evening twilight. The airy fairy fancies of happy dreamland never grow old. They, like the glorious stars above us, are always young. Perhaps you have caught a glimpse of their ethereal wings as they flew around your pillow. Perhaps you have met the same dream boy with the blue eyes and the fair hair, the one who wore the red cap with the silver band and the white coat with pearls on the collar. Perhaps he has taken you to see all the countries of the world and the peoples, the cold wastelands and the burning deserts, the many-colored men and the wild creatures in the sea and in the woods, so that you may learn many things, but come gladly home again. Yes, who knows? Perhaps you also have sailed round the wide world, once in a pea-shell boat. The Castle of Kerglas. Brownie was a poor idiot who belonged to nobody, and he would have died of starvation if it had not been for the kindness of the village people, who gave him food whenever he chose to ask for it. And as for a bed, when night came and he grew sleepy, he looked about for a heap of straw, and making a hole in it, crept in, like a lizard. Idiot though he was never unhappy, but always thanked gratefully those who fed him, and sometimes would stop for a little and sing to them. For he could imitate a lark so well that no one knew which was Brownie and which was the bird. He had been wandering in a forest one day for several hours, and when evening approached, he suddenly felt very hungry. Luckily, just at that place, the trees grew thinner, and he could see a small farmhouse a little way off. Brownie went straight towards it and found the farmer's wife standing at the door, holding in her hands the large bowl out of which her children had eaten their supper. "I am hungry. Will you give me something to eat?" asked the boy. "If you can find anything here, you are welcome to it," answered she. And indeed, there was not much left, as everybody's spoon had dipped in. But Brownie ate what was there with a hearty appetite, and thought that he had never tasted better food. It is made of the finest flour, and mixed with the richest milk, and stirred by the best cook in all the countryside. And though he said it to himself, the woman heard him. "Poor innocent," she murmured. "He does not know what he is saying, but I will cut him a slice of that new wheaten loaf." And so she did, and Brownie ate up every crumb, and declared that nobody less than the bishop's baker could have baked it. This flattered the farmer's wife so much that she gave him some butter to spread on it, and Pironic was still eating it on the doorstep when an armed knight rode up. "Can you tell me the way to the Castle of Kerglas?" asked he. "To Kerglas? Are you really going to Kerglas?" cried the woman, turning pale. "Yes, and in order to get there, I have come from a country so far off that it has taken me 3 months hard riding to travel as far as this." "And why do you want to go to Kerglas?" said she. "I am seeking the basin of gold and the lance of diamonds which are in the castle," he answered. Then Pironic looked up. "The basin and the lance are very costly things," he said suddenly, "more costly and precious than all the crowns in the world," replied the stranger. "For not only will the basin furnish you with the best food that you can dream of, but if you drink of it, it will cure you of any illness, however dangerous, and will even bring the dead back to life if it touches their mouths. As to the diamond lance, that will cut through any stone or metal." "And to whom do these wonders belong?" asked Pironic in amazement. "To a magician named Rogear, who lives in the castle," answered the woman. "Every day he passes along here, mounted on a black mare, with a colt 13 months old trotting behind. But no one dares to attack him, as he always carries his lance." "That is true," said the knight, "but there is a spell laid upon him which forbids his using it within the Castle of Kerglas. The moment he enters, the basin and lance are put away in a dark cellar, which no key but one can open. And that is the place where I wish to fight the magician." "You will never overcome him, Sir Knight," replied the woman, shaking her head. "More than 100 gentlemen have ridden past this house bent on the same errand, and not one has ever come back." "I know that, good woman," returned the knight. "But then they did not have, like me, instructions from the hermit of Blavet." "And what did the hermit tell you?" asked Pironic. "He told me that I should have to pass through a wood full of all sorts of enchantments and voices, which would try to frighten me and make me lose my way. Most of those who have gone before me have wandered they know not where, and perished from cold, hunger, or fatigue." "Well, suppose you get through safely," said the idiot. "If I do," continued the knight, "I shall then meet a sort of fairy, armed with a needle of fire which burns to ashes all it touches. This dwarf stands guarding an apple tree, from which I am bound to pluck an apple." "And next?" inquired Pironic. "Next, I shall find the flower that laughs, protected by a lion whose mane is formed of vipers. I must pluck that flower and go on to the lake of the dragons and fight the black man who holds in his hand the iron ball which never misses its mark and returns of its own accord to its master. After that, I enter the valley of pleasure, where some who conquered all the other obstacles have left their bones. If I can win through this, I shall reach a river with only one ford, where a lady in black will be seated. She will mount my horse behind me and tell me what I am to do next. He paused, and the woman shook her head. You will never be able to do all that, said she. But he bade her remember that these were only matters for men, and galloped away down the path she pointed out. The farmer's wife sighed, and giving Pironic some more food, bade him good night. The idiot rose and was opening the gate which led into the forest when the farmer himself came up. I want a boy to tend my cattle, he said abruptly, as the one I had has run away. Will you stay and do it? And Pironic, though he loved his liberty and hated work, recollected the good food he had eaten and agreed to stop. At sunrise, he collected his herd carefully and led them to the rich pasture which lay along the borders of the forest, cutting himself a hazel wand with which to keep them in order. His task was not quite so easy as it looked, for the cows had a way of straying into the wood, and by the time he had brought one back, another was off. He had gone some distance into the trees after a naughty black cow which gave him more trouble than all the rest, when he heard the noise of horses' feet, and peeping through the leaves, he beheld the giant Rogear seated on his mare, with the colt trotting behind. Round the giant's neck hung the golden bowl suspended from a chain, and in his hand he grasped the diamond lance, which gleamed like fire. But as soon as he was out of sight, the idiot sought in vain for traces of the path he had taken. This happened not only once, but many times, till Pironic grew so used to him that he never troubled to hide. But on each occasion he saw him, the desire to possess the bowl and the lance became stronger. One evening, the boy was sitting alone on the edge of the forest when a man with a white beard stopped beside him. Do you want to know the way to Kerglas? Asked the idiot. And the man answered, I know it well. You have been there without being killed by the magician, cried Pironic. Oh, he had nothing to fear from me, replied the white-bearded man. I am Rogear's elder brother, the wizard Break. When I wish to visit him, I always pass this way. And as even I cannot go through the enchanted wood without losing myself, I call the colt to guide me. Stooping down as he spoke, he traced 3 circles on the ground and murmured some words very low, which Pironic could not hear. Then he added aloud, "Colt, free to run and free to eat. Colt, gallop fast until we meet." And instantly the colt appeared, frisking and jumping to the wizard, who threw a halter over his neck and leapt on his back. Brownie kept silence at the farm about this adventure, but he understood very well that if he was ever to get to Kerglas, he must first catch the colt, which knew the way. Unhappily, he had not heard the magic words uttered by the wizard, and he could not manage to draw the 3 circles. So if he was to summon the colt at all, he must invent some other means of doing it. All day long, while he was herding the cows, he thought and thought how he was to call the colt, for he felt sure that once on its back, he could overcome the other dangers. Meantime, he must be ready in case a chance should come, and he made his preparations at night, when everyone was asleep. Remembering what he had seen the wizard do, he patched up an old halter that was hanging in a corner of the stable, twisted a rope of hemp to catch the colt's feet, and a net such as is used for snaring birds. Next, he sewed roughly together some bits of cloth to serve as a pocket, and this he filled with glue and lark's feathers, a string of beads, a whistle of elder wood, and a slice of bread rubbed over with bacon fat. Then he went out to the path down which Roger, his mare, and the colt always rode, and crumbled the bread on one side of it. Punctual to their hour, all 3 appeared, eagerly watched by Brownie, who lay hid in the bushes close by. Suppose it was useless. Suppose the mare, and not the colt, ate the crumbs. Suppose, but no. The mare and her rider went safely by, vanishing round a corner, while the colt, trotting along with its head on the ground, smelt the bread, and began greedily to lick up the pieces. Oh, how good it was! Why had no one ever given it that before? And so absorbed was the little beast, sniffing about after a few more crumbs, that it never heard Brownie creep up till it felt the halter on its neck and the rope round its feet. And in another moment, someone on its back, going as fast as the hobbles would allow, the colt turned into one of the wildest parts of the forest, while its rider sat trembling at the strange sights he saw. Sometimes the earth seemed to open in front of them, and he was looking into a bottomless pit. Sometimes the trees burst into flames, and he found himself in the midst of a fire. Often, in the act of crossing a stream, the water rose and threatened to sweep him away. And again, at the foot of a mountain, great rocks would roll towards him, as if they would crush him and his colt beneath their weight. To his dying day, Brownie never knew whether these things were real or if he only imagined them, but he pulled down his knitted cap so as to cover his eyes, and trusted the colt to carry him down the right road. At last the forest was left behind, and they came out on a wide plain where the air blew fresh and strong. The idiot ventured to peep out, and found to his relief that the enchantments seemed to have ended, though a thrill of horror shot through him as he noticed the skeletons of men scattered over the plain beside the skeletons of their horses. And what were those gray forms trotting away in the distance? Could they be wolves? But vast though the plain seemed, it did not take long to cross, and very soon the colt entered a sort of shady park in which was standing a single apple tree, its branches bowed down to the ground with the weight of its fruit. In front was the Corrigan, the little fairy man, holding in his hand the fiery sword, which reduced to ashes everything it touched. At the sight of Pironic, he uttered a piercing scream and raised his sword, but without appearing surprised, the youth only lifted his cap, though he took care to remain at a little distance. "Do not be alarmed, my prince," said Pironic. "I am just on my way to Kerglas, as the noble Rogiar has begged me to come to him on business." "Begged you to come?" repeated the dwarf. "And who, then, are you?" "I am the new servant he has engaged, as you know very well," answered Pironic. "I do not know at all," rejoined the Corrigan sulkily, "and you may be a robber for all I can tell." "I am so sorry," replied Pironic, "but I may be wrong in calling myself a servant, for I am only a bird catcher. But do not delay me, I pray, for His Highness, the magician, expects me, and as you see, has lent me his colt so that I may reach the castle all the quicker." At these words, the Corrigan cast his eyes for the first time on the colt, which he knew to be the one belonging to the magician, and began to think that the young man was speaking the truth. After examining the horse, he studied the rider, who had such an innocent and indeed vacant air that he appeared incapable of inventing a story. Still, the dwarf did not feel quite sure that all was right, and asked what the magician wanted with a bird catcher. "From what he says, he wants one very badly," replied Pironic, "as he declares that all his grain and all the fruit in his garden at Kerglas are eaten up by the birds." "And how are you going to stop that, my fine fellow?" inquired the Corrigan, and Pironic showed him the snare he had prepared, and remarked that no bird could possibly escape from it. "That is just what I should like to be sure of," answered the Corrigan. "My apples are completely eaten up by blackbirds and thrushes. Lay your snare, and if you can manage to catch them, I will let you pass." That is a fair bargain." And as he spoke, Pironic jumped down and fastened his colt to a tree. Then, stooping, he fixed one end of the net to the trunk of the apple tree and called to the Corrigan to hold the other while he took out the pegs. The dwarf did as he was bid, when suddenly Pironic threw the noose over his neck and drew it close, and the Corrigan was held as fast as any of the birds he wished to snare. Shrieking with rage, he tried to undo the cord, but he only pulled the knot tighter. He had put down the sword on the grass, and Pironic had been careful to fix the net on the other side of the tree, so that it was now easy for him to pluck an apple and to mount his horse without being hindered by the dwarf, whom he left to his fate. When they had left the plain behind them, Pironic and his steed found themselves in a narrow valley in which was a grove of trees, full of all sorts of sweet-smelling things, roses of every color, yellow broom, pink honeysuckle, while above them all towered a wonderful scarlet pansy whose face bore a strange expression. This was the flower that laughs, and no one who looked at it could help laughing too. Pironic's heart beat high at the thought that he had reached safely the second trial, and he gazed quite calmly at the lion with the mane of vipers twisting and twirling, who walked up and down in front of the grove. The young man pulled up and removed his cap, for, idiot though he was, he knew that when you have to do with people greater than yourself, a cap is more useful in the hand than on the head. Then, after wishing all kinds of good fortune to the lion and his family, he inquired if he was on the right road to Kerglas. "And what is your business at Kerglas?" asked the lion with a growl and showing his teeth. "With all respect," answered Pironic, pretending to be very frightened, "I am the servant of a lady who is a friend of the noble Rogear and sends him some larks for a pasty." "Larks?" cried the lion, licking his long whiskers. "Why, it must be a century since I have had any. Have you a large quantity with you?" "As many as this bag will hold," replied Pironic, opening, as he spoke, the bag which he had filled with feathers and glue. And to prove what he said, he turned his back on the lion and began to imitate the song of a lark. "Come," exclaimed the lion, whose mouth watered, "show me the birds. I should like to see if they are fat enough for my master." "I would do it with pleasure," answered the idiot, "but if I once open the bag, they will all fly away." "Well, open it wide enough for me to look in," said the lion, drawing a little nearer. Now, this was just what Pironic had been hoping for. So he held the bag while the lion opened it carefully and put his head right inside so that he might get a good mouthful of larks. But the mass of feathers and glue stuck to him, and before he could pull his head out again, Pironic had drawn tight the cord and tied it in a knot that no man could untie. Then, quickly gathering the flower that laughs, he rode off as fast as the colt could take him. The path soon led to the lake of the dragons, which he had to swim across. The colt, who was accustomed to it, plunged into the water without hesitation. But as soon as the dragons caught sight of Pironic, they approached from all parts of the lake in order to devour him. This time, Pironic did not trouble to take off his cap, but he threw the beads he carried with him into the water, as you throw black corn to a duck. And with each bead that he swallowed, a dragon turned on his back and died, so that the idiot reached the other side without further trouble. The valley, guarded by the black man, now lay before him, and from afar Pironic beheld him, chained by one foot to a rock at the entrance, and holding the iron ball, which never missed its mark and always returned to its master's hand. In his head, the black man had 6 eyes that were never all shut at once, but kept watch one after the other. At this moment, they were all open, and Pironic knew well that if the black man caught a glimpse of him, he would cast his ball. So, hiding the colt behind a thicket of bushes, he crawled along a ditch and crouched close to the very rock to which the black man was chained. The day was hot, and after a while, the man began to grow sleepy. 2 of his eyes closed, and Pironic sang gently. In a moment, a 3rd eye shut, and Pironic sang on. The lid of a 4th eye dropped heavily, and then those of the 5th and the 6th. The black man was asleep altogether. Then, on tiptoe, the idiot crept back to the colt, which he led over soft moss, past the black man, into the vale of pleasure. A delicious garden full of fruits that dangled before your mouth, fountains running with wine, and flowers chanting in soft little voices. Further on, tables were spread with food, and girls dancing on the grass called to him to join them. Pironic heard, and scarcely knowing what he did, drew the colt into a slower pace. He sniffed greedily the smell of the dishes, and raised his head the better to see the dancers. Another instant, and he would have stopped altogether and been lost, like others before him, when suddenly there came to him, like a vision, the golden bowl and the diamond lance. Drawing his whistle from his pocket, he blew it loudly, so as to drown the sweet sounds about him, and ate what was left of his bread and bacon to still the craving of the magic fruits. His eyes he fixed steadily on the ears of the colt, that he might not see the dancers. In this way, he was able to reach the end of the garden, and at length perceived the Castle of Kerglas, with the river between them, which had only one fort. Would the lady be there, as the old man had told him? Yes, Surely that was she, sitting on a rock, in a black satin dress, and her face the color of a Moorish woman's. The idiot rode up and took off his cap more politely than ever, and asked if she did not wish to cross the river. "I was waiting for you to help me do so," answered she. "Come near, that I may get up behind you." Pironic did as she bade him, and by the help of his arm, she jumped nimbly onto the back of the colt. "Do you know how to kill the magician?" asked the lady as they were crossing the ford. "I thought that, being a magician, he was immortal, and that no one could kill him," replied Pironic. "Persuade him to taste that apple, and he will die. And if that is not enough, I will touch him with my finger, for I am the plague," answered she. "But if I kill him, how am I to get the golden bowl and the diamond lance that are hidden in the cellar, without a key?" rejoined Pironic. "The flower that laughs opens all doors and lightens all darkness," said the lady. And as she spoke, they reached the further bank and advanced towards the castle. In front of the entrance was a sort of tent supported on poles, and under it the giant was sitting, basking in the sun. As soon as he noticed the colt bearing Pironic and the lady, he lifted his head and cried in a voice of thunder, "Why, it is surely the idiot riding my colt 13 months old." "Greatest of magicians, you are right," answered Pironic. "And how did you manage to catch him?" asked the giant. "By repeating what I learnt from your brother Bryac on the edge of the forest," replied the idiot. "I just said, 'Colt, free to run and free to eat. Colt, gallop fast until we meet,' and it came directly." "You know my brother, then?" inquired the giant. "Tell me why he sent you here." "To bring you 2 gifts which he has just received from the country of the Moors," answered Pironic. "The apple of delight and the woman of submission. If you eat the apple, you will not desire anything else, and if you take the woman as your servant, you will never wish for another." "Well, give me the apple, and bid the woman get down," answered Roger. The idiot obeyed, but at the first taste of the apple, the giant staggered, and as the long yellow finger of the woman touched him, he fell dead, leaving the magician where he lay. Pironic entered the palace, bearing with him the flower that laughs. 50 doors flew open before him, and at length he reached a long flight of steps which seemed to lead into the bowels of the earth. Down these he went till he came to a silver door without a bar or key. Then he held up high the flower that laughs, and the door slowly swung back, displaying a deep cavern, which was as bright as day from the shining of the golden bowl and the diamond lance. The idiot hastily ran forward, and hung the bowl round his neck from the chain which was attached to it, and took the lance in his hand. As he did so, the ground shook beneath him, and with an awful rumbling, the palace disappeared, and Pironic found himself standing close to the forest where he led the cattle to graze. Though darkness was coming on, Pironic never thought of entering the farm, but followed the road which led to the court of the Duke of Brittany. As he passed through the town of Vannes, he stopped at a tailor's shop and bought a beautiful costume of brown velvet and a white horse, which he paid for with a handful of gold that he had picked up in the corridor of the Castle of Kerglas. Thus he made his way to the city of Nantes, which at that moment was besieged by the French. A little way off, Pironic stopped and looked about him. For miles round the country was bare, for the enemy had cut down every tree and burnt every blade of corn. And idiot though he might be, Pironic was able to grasp that inside the gates men were dying of famine. He was still gazing with horror when a trumpeter appeared on the walls, and after blowing a loud blast, announced that the Duke would adopt as his heir the man who could drive the French out of the country. On the four sides of the city, the trumpeter blew his blast, and the last time Pironic, who had ridden up as close as he might, answered him. "You need blow no more," said he, "for I myself will free the town from her enemies." And turning to a soldier who came running up, waving his sword, he touched him with the magic lance, and he fell dead on the spot. The men who were following stood still, amazed. Their comrade's armor had not been pierced. Of that they were sure, yet he was dead, as if he had been struck to the heart. But before they had time to recover from their astonishment, Pironic cried out, "You see how my foes will fare. Now behold what I can do for my friends." And stooping down, he laid the golden bowl against the mouth of the soldier, who sat up as well as ever. Then, jumping his horse across the trench, he entered the gate of the city, which had opened wide enough to receive him. The news of these marvels quickly spread through the town, and put fresh spirit into the garrison, so that they declared themselves able to fight under the command of the young stranger. And as the bowl restored all the dead Bretons to life, Pironic soon had an army large enough to drive away the French, and fulfilled his promise of delivering his country. As to the bowl and the lance, no one knows what became of them, but some say that Bryac the sorcerer managed to steal them again, and that anyone who wishes to possess them must seek them as Pironic did. A French puck. Among the mountain pastures and valleys that lie in the center of France, there dwelt a mischievous kind of spirit, whose delight it was to play tricks on everybody, and particularly on the shepherds and the cowboys. they never knew when they were safe from him, as he could change himself into a man, woman, or child, a stick, a goat, a plowshare. Indeed, there was only one thing whose shape he could not take, and that was a needle. At least, he could transform himself into a needle, but try as he might, he never was able to imitate the whole. So every woman would have found him out at once, and this he knew. Now the hour oftenest chosen by this naughty sprite, whom we will call Puck, for performing his pranks, was about midnight, just when the shepherds and cowherds, tired out with their long day's work, were sound asleep. Then he would go into the cowsheds and unfasten the chains that fixed each beast in its own stall, and let them fall with a heavy clang to the ground. The noise was so loud that it was certain to awaken the cowboys, however fatigued they might be, and they dragged themselves wearily to the stable to put back the chains. But no sooner had they returned to their beds than the same thing happened again, and so on till the morning. Or perhaps Puck would spend his night in plaiting together the manes and tails of 2 of the horses, so that it would take the grooms hours of labor to get them right in the morning, while Puck, hidden among the hay in the loft, would peep out to watch them, enjoying himself amazingly all the time. One evening, more than 80 years ago, a man named William was passing along the bank of a stream when he noticed a sheep who was bleating loudly. William thought it must have strayed from the flock, and that he had better take it home with him till he could discover its owner. So he went up to where it was standing, and as it seemed so tired that it could hardly walk, he hoisted it on his shoulders and continued on his way. The sheep was pretty heavy, but the good man was merciful and staggered along as best he could under his load. "It is not much further," he thought to himself as he reached an avenue of walnut trees, when suddenly a voice spoke out from over his head and made him jump. "Where are you?" said the voice, and the sheep answered, "Here, on the shoulders of a donkey." In another moment, the sheep was standing on the ground, and William was running towards home as fast as his legs would carry him. But as he went, a laugh, which yet was something of a bleat, rang in his ears, and though he tried not to hear, the words reached him. "Oh dear, what fun I have had, to be sure." Puck was careful not always to play his tricks in the same place, but visited one village after another, so that everyone trembled lest he should be the next victim. After a bit, he grew tired of cowboys and shepherds, and wondered if there was no one else to give him some sport. At length, he was told of a young couple who were going to the nearest town to buy all that they needed for setting up house, quite certain that they would forget something which they could not do without. Puck waited patiently till they were jogging along in their cart on their return journey, and changed himself into a fly in order to overhear their conversation. For a long time, it was very dull, all about their wedding day next month and who were to be invited. This led the bride to her wedding dress, and she gave a little scream. Just think! Oh, how could I be so stupid? I have forgotten to buy the different colored reels of cotton to match my clothes. Dear, dear, exclaimed the young man, that is unlucky. And didn't you tell me that the dressmaker was coming in tomorrow? Yes, I did. And then, suddenly, she gave another little scream, which had quite a different sound from the first. Look! Look! The bridegroom looked, and on one side of the road he saw a large ball of thread of all colors, of all the colors, that is, of the dresses that were tied onto the back of the cart. Well, that is a wonderful piece of good fortune, cried he as he sprang out to get it. One would think a fairy had put it there on purpose. Perhaps she has, laughed the girl, and as she spoke, she seemed to hear an echo of her laughter coming from the horse. But of course, that was nonsense. The dressmaker was delighted with the thread that was given her. It matched the stuffs so perfectly and never tied itself in knots or broke perpetually, as most thread did. She finished her work much quicker than she expected, and the bride said she was to be sure to come to the church and see her in her wedding dress. There was a great crowd assembled to witness the ceremony, for the young people were immense favorites in the neighborhood, and their parents were very rich. The doors were open, and the bride could be seen from afar, walking under the chestnut avenue. "What a beautiful girl!" exclaimed the men. "What a lovely dress!" whispered the women. But just as she entered the church and took the hand of the bridegroom, who was waiting for her, a loud noise was heard. Crick, crack, crick, crack, and the wedding garments fell to the ground, to the great confusion of the wearer. Not that the ceremony was put off for a little thing like that. Cloaks in profusion were instantly offered to the young bride, but she was so upset that she could hardly keep from tears. One of the guests, more curious than the rest, stayed behind to examine the dress, determined, if she could, to find out the cause of the disaster. The thread must have been rotten, she said to herself. I will see if I can break it. But search as she would, she could find none. The thread had vanished. A fish story. Perhaps you think that fishes were always fishes and never lived anywhere except in the water. But if you went to Australia and talked to the black people in the sandy desert in the center of the country, you would learn something quite different. They would tell you that long, long ago, you would have met fishes on the land, wandering from place to place, and hunting all sorts of animals. And if you consider how fishes are made, you will understand how difficult this must have been, and how clever they were to do it. Indeed, so clever were they that they might have been hunting still if a terrible thing had not happened. One day, the whole fish tribe came back very tired from a hunting expedition and looked about for a nice, cool spot in which to pitch their camp. It was very hot, and they thought that they could not find a more comfortable place than under the branches of a large tree which grew by the bank of a river. So they made their fire to cook some food right on the edge of a steep bank, which had a deep pool of water lying beneath it at the bottom. While the food was cooking, they all stretched themselves lazily out under the tree and were just dropping off to sleep when a big black cloud, which they had never noticed spread over the sun, and heavy drops of rain began to fall, so that the fire was almost put out. And that, you know, is a very serious thing in savage countries where they have no matches, for it is very hard to light it again. To make matters worse, an icy wind began to blow, and the poor fishes were chilled right through their bodies. "This will never do," said Thugai, the oldest of all the fish tribe. "We shall die of cold unless we can light the fire again." And he bade his sons rub 2 sticks together in the hope of kindling a flame. But though they rubbed till they were tired, not a spark could they produce. "Let me try," cried Biarnuga, the bony fish, but he had no better luck, and no more had Kumbal, the bream, nor any of the rest. "It is no use," exclaimed Thugai at last. "The wood is too wet. We must just sit and wait till the sun comes out again and dries it." Then a very little fish indeed, not more than 4 inches long, and the youngest of the tribe, bowed himself before Thugai, saying, "Ask my father, Gudhu the cod, to light the fire. He is skilled in magic more than most fishes." So Thugai asked him, and Gudhu stripped some pieces of bark off a tree and placed them on top of the smoldering ashes. Then he knelt by the side of the fire and blew at it for a long while, till slowly the feeble red glow became a little stronger, and the edges of the bark showed signs of curling up. When the rest of the tribe saw this, they pressed close, keeping their backs towards the piercing wind. But Gudhu told them they must go to the other side, as he wanted the wind to fan his fire. By and by, the spark grew into a flame, and a merry crackling was heard. "More wood," cried Gudhu, and they all ran and gathered wood and heaped it on the flames, which leaped and roared and sputtered. "We shall soon be warm now," said the people one to another. "Truly Gudu is great." And they crowded round again, closer and closer. Suddenly, with a shriek, a blast of wind swept down from the hills and blew the fire out towards them. They sprang back hurriedly, quite forgetting where they stood. And all fell down the bank, each tumbling over the other, till they rolled into the pool that lay below. Oh, how cold it was in that dark water on which the sun never shone. Then, in an instant, they felt warm again, for the fire, driven by the strong wind, had followed them right down to the bottom of the pool, where it burned as brightly as ever, and the fishes gathered round it as they had done on the top of the cliff, and found the flames as hot as before. And that fire never went out, like those upon land, but kept burning forever. So now you know why. If you dive deep down below the cold surface of the water on a frosty day, you will find it comfortable and pleasant underneath, and be quite sorry that you cannot stay there